And I say we start on our backs. That blanket slash towel and ball handy. We'll just find our way onto our spine. Let your body just kind of be received by the mat underneath you. Let's take some nice full breaths into the center of the lung space. Let's see if we can elongate the exhale just a little bit more intently. If at the end of those exhales, you can feel like you've landed. Like you really settled in to the physicality of your body and the perimeter of your mat. Let's give ourselves just 60 more seconds here. Just explicitly focusing on that sensation of landing at the end of our exhale. And then as you are ready, let's utilize an inhale to bring our knees into a bent position so the kneecaps can point towards the ceiling space. We'll push down through the toe mounds and toe prints. So a little bit of lightness in the heels. You don't have to lift the heels, but just a little bit of lightness there. And let's lift ourselves up into a bridge that feels appropriate. And then we'll release the tailbone down and pull the thighs in towards the torso. Really thinking about getting that compression here. And then release your left leg. Keep your right leg tight to the body and let the left hand come over and assist. And we'll just get a nice single leg compression here. The difference in intensity available to that hip capsule. And we'll inhale and bring the left knee back up to mirror the right. And then release the right and engage on that left side. Just really feeling into our capacity to compress the hip capsule. And at the same time, be relieved and relaxed across the spine and into the end of the exhale cycle of each breath. And then we'll release the left leg so that it mirrors the right. Point the toes away from you and reach the hands up and overhead towards the wall behind you, not towards the ceiling. And then think about what you need to do to bring the lumbar into a little bit of a neutral space so we don't get that big arch, but instead we really feel into the links. And then let's relax. We'll bend our knees. Let the knees start a little lateral sway. Just exploring that lumbar rotation. And then eventually we're going to pick one side or the other, whatever side feels most appropriate to just fall over onto. And we'll use our top hand to help us up into a nice comfy seat. Let's extend the legs down the mat so we have staff, and then just follow that forward into a fold. So not a lot of the posterior chain awake yet, or theoretically awake yet. And if you're really restricted here, just remember that the knees can bend significantly to help alleviate that restriction. And then although we have a more upright positioning, let's see if we can really feel the landing into the exhale. So that our breath cycles are about experiencing the shape we're in on the inhale, and then giving into surrendering to that shape on the exhale. And let's just spend another 60 seconds here, really focusing on surrender into the end of the exhale so that when you land, it is almost like you're held in the physical posture that you're currently in. And when it feels appropriate to you, let's walk ourselves back up into seat. We'll take our left knee and bend that. And then if this feels like enough, stay here. And it may not feel like, oh, this is too much, but if it feels like enough in comparison to the next space where we're going to take our left foot and we're going to tuck that next to us, not really underneath us, right? But maybe the big toe mound is kind of a little bit under the glute tissue. And then this really puts some tension or request on this right side posterior chain. So hamstring, high calf insertion, that space behind the knee can be really intense here. We're going to take ourselves back forward into a fold. If having the foot next to us just doesn't feel appropriate, just go with a knee bend and take the inside edge with your left shoulder so that you're inside the thigh. So really choosing the appropriate space. And then again, although this shape is pretty intense, really think about slowing down your rate of respiration and finding a way to surrender to this space. Slow breath, fluid transitions, concentrating on the exhale portion. And then as it feels appropriate, we'll walk our torso back up towards vertical, extend the left leg out in front of us just to get a little bit of blood flow normalization. And then let's bend both knees, let the bottoms of the feet come together and the knees fall out wide, and just take your torso forward into a little seated butterfly fold. This is pretty low back specific. Can you maybe use some lateral movement, but can the movements all be slow and integrated with your breath? Last 30 seconds here. And when it feels appropriate, let's bring our spine back towards vertical. We'll extend our left leg down the mat, and we're going to tuck our right leg next to us like we did on the first side. Checking to see if that's right. If it's not, we bring that right foot forward. We have the knee vertical. We bring the right shoulder inside of that right thigh. And then we'll just take ourselves forward into the fold. Once again, recognizing that there is an extra set of intensity here because of the way we have our alternate side placed, and really trying to find the ease around that extra bit of intensity. And there's this little village kind of nestled between this very lush forest and this mountainous region. And the village itself is bordered by this beautiful, pristine mountain river. The river is an integral part of the community, really provides the lifeblood of commerce, but it also has its second side of the coin. It is capable, especially during the rainy season, of overfilling, and that overfilling and flooding that comes with it is incredibly detrimental to the village itself. And so over the course of time, this village has created its own system and systems to prevent as much of that natural processes as possible. When it's appropriate, we'll walk up into seat, bring our right leg down to mirror the left and give yourself a little bit of leg movement. And then bottoms of the feet will once again come together, and we'll once again take ourselves into the seated little butterfly fold. Last 30 seconds here. Walk ourselves up in a seat. And from seat, let's engage our blanket. And from a shelf fold, let's go half fold hamburger style, and then half fold, so we end up with like a little bit of an approximation of a block. And we're going to set that right next to, so let's take our legs to an extended position, bend our right knee, and then let that fall out wide. And then you're gonna let the block blanket style block come right behind you. We want to have an equal amount of density on the left and right, so make sure that you find how you can create that, and then keeping that left leg, which I think I said I might have mirrored there, whichever leg we have out, let's keep that out. And then let's lower ourselves into what is a very large low back bend. If this feels like it's too much, take your blanket out. You can try that first fold, or you can go no blanket at all with just the open leg. So, just depending on what feels appropriate for you this morning, let's pick a low back bend that is supportive of expansion and allows us to get in to that state of landing at the end of our exhale breath, where we feel like we're received and held by both the prop and the mat now. Landing into that exhale breath. Just continually working back to that. And then when it feels appropriate, we're going to bring our left knee to a bent position. Right knee is going to mirror. Push down into the toe mounds and heels. Lift your belt line high enough to slide the prop underneath the tailbone and land in a bridge. And so this is the kind of exact opposite of what we've just done. We've gone into a big extension. Now we're going into a relatively big flexion of the lumbar spine. Again, if this feels like it's too much, lower down, right? If you're feeling like the lumbar just took that extension to its fullest capacity and now going into flexion is just too much, you can remove that and just come back to neutral and let the spine reset. Really thinking about how your body is responding, not worried about what the guide is here. Instead, thinking through maximum benefit for your body this morning. Obviously, or maybe not obviously, but there's an option, right? If you're feeling, if your spine feels great and everything's all good and you want to go for a little bit more depth, you can extend the legs down the mat. So just depends on what feels right for you. Landing with your exhale breath. Feeling into the end of that exhale breath, really consciously putting your focus on the end of that exhale breath. And eventually, let's press into our toe mounds and heels. We'll lift our belt line high enough that we can slide the prop back into the lumbar, release the tailbone down to the mat. And then let's let the right knee fall out wide and we'll extend the left leg down the mat. Really using your awareness here to identify if this is too much for your body. This is a big, significant adjustment here. And so if it feels like it's too much, shrink the depth, benefit your body. Don't fight against it here. Landing into your exhale. Easing. Being comforted by the end, that conscious awareness of the end of each exhale breath cycle. And when it feels appropriate, right knee lifts, left knee bends. Push into the toe mounds, heels, lift your belt line high enough to slide the prop back underneath your tailbone for the supported bridge, the second side of the second side. And then re-find the soothing quality of the conscious continuation of that awareness all the way through the end of the breath. Just really taking your awareness and following the end of the breath until it's no longer there, and then feeling into that ability to land there. To relax there. To recharge there. Last 30 seconds here. And then it feels appropriate. Let's push into the toe mounds and heels, lift our belt line. And we'll just let the spine come down and really relax here. Really let the spine just integrate with the neutrality of the mat. Be it as at ease as is possible. And let's just give ourselves 30 more seconds just to reintegrate what we've done here. And then when you're right, let's bring our knees into a bent position if they're not there, and let them fall to one side or the other, whatever side's most appropriate. And we're going to press ourselves into a seat just briefly for a couple of things. The first thing we're going to do is set up our prop. So we're going to take our blanket or towel back to a shelf fold and go hot dog style, and then take our ball and we're just going to place that in the middle of our little hot dog bun there, so that we have kind of a protected ball in the middle of the bun, middle of the blanket. And let's just put that kind of towards the top of the mat. You can have some room for your head. We're going to use this on our neck eventually. And then let's extend our legs down the mat. And as the legs extend, follow them forward into one more forward fold, seated forward fold. Just checking in on the space we've created in the posterior chain since we started class here. Really feeling into what you've done. Still landing in that exhale breath. And so one of the primary things that this little village has done is they've identified their fastest and most athletically gifted young people. And they use that athleticism and that speed to create like an early warning system against incoming flash floods. This is especially important during the rainy season. And so during the rainy season, the most athletically gifted and the most elite endurance speed runners are used. And on this particular day, the very fastest member of the community is set on watch. And she's up on this tower, this wooden tower that gives her this perch, probably like 15 feet in the air, gives her this perch where she can see up the mountain. And her job is just to observe the river. And if she sees an increase in water flow, it really, if she's good, if she's very observant, they'll have maybe 6 to 8 hours of preparatory time. Even if she's not remarkably observant, they should have 2 or 3 hours of prep time with her observations. With your next inhale, let's walk ourselves back up in a seat. And then we're going to lower ourselves down so that the middle of our neck can be cradled by the pressure of that ball blanket combination. So really looking to find a spot where you can feel how the ball is impacting your cervical spine, and then letting the bottoms of the feet come together and the knees fall out wide. We're going to use this ball on the neck for a little bit of an extended period of time, but we won't have our legs in this open shape for all that long. And so this young woman truly hates when it is her turn to observe the river. She can't think of anything less fulfilling than watching water go by from a perch 15 feet off the ground. And so on this particular day, it's kind of towards the end of her shift, she has completely and fully zoned out into a daydream. Let's inhale and bring our knees back together and extend our legs down the mat. And as the legs extend down the mat, think about getting your body comfortable. Let the arms come out towards cactus or T. And then let's turn our gaze over towards the left. As you turn here, key is we don't want the neck to be put into a flexion space. So we don't want the chin to tuck at all. So make sure as you're doing this, you're getting that little bit of openness. There's a pretty easy way if you lift the chin just slightly away from the sternum that we get back into that subtle extension of the cervical spine. Last 20 seconds here. Let's bring our head back to neutral. Make sure that you can get back into a space where the ball feels like it's supporting that extension articulation. And then think about really neutralizing the entirety of the spinal column. And so this young woman is snapped out of her daydream by the sound, this horrible sound of rushing water and snapping trees. And she's completely missed hours of the warning signs of this flash flood. And she leaps off this tower, this 15-foot height, and lands as athletic as she can be. And she just instantly starts running, screaming towards her village that there's a flood coming. But with every step she's taking, it's becoming more and more apparent that she is falling behind. Let's take that second side. So we're going to rotate our head. Once again, finding a spot where you can lift the chin just slightly, or at least, very worst case, you're not tucking the chin down to the sternum. And so the further she falls behind this flood, the more she thinks about all of the people in her community in which she's let down. And that thought becomes so overwhelming that at a certain point, she just stops running. And in fact, she stops heading towards her village at all. She makes a right turn and just starts walking aimlessly into the jungle. The jungle itself has all of these legends of the dangers that are encapsulated within it. But at the current moment, she doesn't care. She just wants to get away from what she's done to her village. Last 5 seconds here. And then when it feels appropriate for you, we're going to once again bring our chin back to neutral, our spine back in line, and just feel that ball kind of pressing into the cervical spine. If, and this is a big if, so you really have to ask yourself if you want more here. If you feel like you want a little more, we can press into the toe mounts and get a little bit of pressure, maybe even lift the tailbone. You can even lift into a bridge. but it has to be appropriate for your neck here, right? So if more pressure isn't the answer, don't apply more pressure. If more pressure seems like it would be beneficial, you can lift yourself into that little bridge and just get some more focused, concentrated intensity where that ball is sitting against your cervical spine. And then eventually we'll release the tailbone down to the mat. Let's take our blanket out from underneath us. We'll pull that ball out from under or from inside the blanket, and then take the blanket slash towel, and let's open that up into a towel length. The one unfold from shelf fold, and we'll roll that. And that roll is going to come across the ankles, tuck underneath the ankles, and let the knees have some support out wide. Hands can come behind the head here, and if you really could benefit from some cervical spine traction, you can kind of cup the back of the head and just use your hands to elevate your head away from your shoulders. Really take that space, that length that you put into the neck, and start applying it. And eventually you can obviously relax. Find your way back to your breath. Find your way back to the landing and the exhale. The conscious tracking of the exhale cycle of your breath. And so as this young woman gets further into the forest, as the kind of screams of her community, as they work to build a levee to protect their village without warning, are dwindling away, she starts to get this distinct feeling that she's being followed by someone. And so she'll stop and she'll listen and she'll look around. And every time she stops, any sound that she might be hearing goes silent. And anytime she looks in one direction or the other, it's like the sound immediately goes behind her. And at a certain point, she's absolutely convinced someone or something is tracking her. When it feels appropriate for you, let's inhale and bring our knees into a bent position. Kneecaps point towards the ceiling. And then we will start to move the knees laterally, just a little lateral exploration, lumbar rotation, kind of winding down our movement mechanisms. At a certain point, this young woman just stops completely in her tracks. And she rotates her head as far as she can so that she can look behind her. And she hears this snap in front of her, and she whips her head back around. No more than 2 feet in front of her is this very old, face fully painted, very terrifying looking witch doctor. And this witch doctor, this very like deep hissing voice, Says, who are you running from? And this young woman is startled, but she also has some recognition of who this person might be. There are legends of this witch doctor living in these woods. And so she kind of stumbles back into, I wasn't sure who was following me. Next time your knees fall over to the left, let's let them settle there. And the witch doctor kind of hisses back. He says, I didn't ask who was following you. I asked who you're running from. And he reaches out and he grabs her wrists. And like with some level of superhuman strength, he's like pulling her through the woods. And then almost before she knows what could possibly be happening, this fire appears, like it's appeared out of nowhere. And she's like flung down next to this fire. And then in the same way, it's like this tea appears. And the witch doctor hands her this tea. Your next inhale will bring our knees back to neutral. And then with an exhale, we'll let them fall over to the second side. And as the witch doctor hands over this tea, again hisses, who are you running from? And then before she even has a chance to answer, he launches into this story about this horrific monster that lives in these woods, in this jungle. And he starts talking about this monster that is a pursuit monster. And once it sees you, it will pursue you. And when you start to run, it will become more horrible. It will become more horrific. It will become more powerful. It will become larger. It will become scarier. And the faster you run, the more horrific this monster becomes. And he's going into all of these details about this horrific monster. Next time you take an inhale breath, let's bring our knees back to neutral. And as the knees come back to neutral, we'll just ask ourselves if there's anything our body could benefit from before Shavasana. And if there's anything that would be advantageous for us, let's offer that. And if you're ready for some stillness, let's find our way into a position where we can appreciate our set stillness for the morning. And so eventually this young woman gets so worked up by the details of this story that this witch doctor is telling of this horrific monster that she just bursts out and she says, stop, stop, stop. How do I defeat it? When it feels appropriate for you, we're just finding our way into that stillness. So this witch doctor kind of cackles, says, "Oh, you want to defeat this hideous monster, this monster that gets stronger as you run away." And he turns back to that hiss voice and he says, "If you want to defeat it, you'll have to turn and face it." And that hits this young woman like a ton of bricks. And she realizes what she needs to do. And she gets up. She graciously thanks the witch doctor and she heads back to her village to help build the levees, protect from the flood. We'll start to bring some movement into our fingers and our toes. Up into our wrists and our ankles, our elbows and our knees, shoulders and hips, neck, head, jaw, eyes. Eventually, the entirety of the body will start to move. And from that movement, we'll transition from the shapes we are in back into a seat. Reorganizing ourselves with a vertical spine, the breath get fluid, find your way to the landing into that exhale. Let your eyes close. And we'll inhale our hands together, heart center. Over the course of the next 7 days, can you remind yourself that the problems you choose to run from have a tendency to chase you, and see how that impacts your experience? Thank you so much for being a part of this morning's practice and for being you. Happy New Year. Namaste. Happy Sunday, guys. Appreciate the heck out of you being here. I'll be back tomorrow night if you want to move, and we'll do this again next Sunday. If I don't see you tomorrow, have a beautiful week. Love you. Mwah.